So I'm an artist. And as an artist, I should of course have the ambition to make great art. But I never say that. I never say that I want to make great art. Sie verstehen? Großartige Kunst? Nein. I never say it, and actually I never think about it either. But when you think about it, isn't that why you make art? I mean, if you're making art, isn't it to make great art? But I have to confess that I ended up in the art business because I didn't want to have a regular job. And first I tried to study at university, and I studied useless subjects like philosophy. And in that way I felt, I was rather safe. The only problematic thing with that was like when you went to the student union bar at night, and you would have this conversation which you would have at the student union bar, and people would ask, what are you studying? And then I said, I'm studying philosophy. And what are you going to do with that? And I got so tired of those discussions that in the end I would always say, I'm studying economy. And then end of that conversation, you couldn't just move on into whatever you would do at a student bar. But still, even studying philosophy and languages, translation theory, things like that, which I studied. Still, in the long run, I had the feeling that if I keep on doing this, I will end up having a job. So that's when I got into art. And the great thing about getting into art is that first you have to study. You understand? Erst muss man sich ausbilden. And if you think this is completely crap and uninteresting, you can also leave. You can leave whenever you like. That's okay. I have one person who will maybe sit the whole thing. So I'll move on. And I went to art school for 9 years. 9 years. Starting in 1993. 1993. And I knew that there would be a difference between studying philosophy and study art. But when I came to art school, I got a little bit surprised. Because there was like no teaching on how you make art. Nothing. So that wasn't the difference. When I studied philosophy, and this is maybe a lot to say, but I think it's partially true. It's true in a way. Maybe it sounds, better or worse than it's meant to. But when I studied philosophy, somehow we were taught how to think. But at art school, this was the difference between art school and philosophy. At art school, we were taught what to think. And you might think this is a trivial difference. Like this is just, so what? But if you think about it, it is a difference. It's a difference. And this was 1993, and what we were taught to think in 1993 was that modernism was bad. Modernism was bad. And this got me a bit confused, because I didn't know what modernism was. So I had to look it up, but there wasn't Wikipedia in 1993. So I had to read books. And what I found out that was modernism could be, you know, a little bit of everything. Not everything, but a lot of things. It could be everything from Charles Baudelaire, Les Fleurs de Mal, Die Blumen des Bösen, to Lamborghini sports cars, to brown electrical shavers. But actually, I don't think that my teachers had anything against brown electrical shavers. And they were all men, and I think they could very well even use them every day, or maybe every second day if they didn't have much growth of beard, and not, you know, not think it would be a bad thing. And if one of these guys, one of these teacher men, had been offered a Lamborghini sports car, I don't think they would have said no. That wasn't the problem. Even if, I mean, if you really want one image of modernism, wouldn't that be a Lamborghini sports car? And when you're doing art, like when you're doing art, and maybe you're even exhibiting art, and maybe you're even exhibiting your art in a big public space, like, you know, then you've made it. But then the exhibition after that is an exhibition with cars, you know, and there's going to be, like, you know, 200 times as many people coming to see cars than you know, coming to see contemporary art. It's always like that. People love looking at cars, you know. That's the way it is. At art school in 1993, there were some people painting, but that was like really uncool in 1993. It was, and these painters, they were like hopeless people, hiding in their studios, and very shy. And when they were asked by the teachers to sort of conceptualize what they were doing, they couldn't do it. And Kjolgung, there's a reaction.
We won't ask for that here.
You won't ask for it in this art school?
No, never.
Are you're a teacher?
Yes, no, but...
Yes, no?
Yes, no. No, I am, but I wasn't at the time.
You wasn't a teacher in 19... I hope not. I hope not. Because then you would be old now, and that's not fun. No, I don't believe it. Yeah. Did you have a point with that comment?
Yes, I
Yeah.
would love to have a teacher who would ask me to conceptualize. But
Ah.
we didn't have that here.
Yeah.
In
No. Yeah.
1994.
Yeah. Okay. 1993. Yeah. No. Yeah. And you almost got the feeling that these painters, like, to them, art was therapy, you know, and that's the worst thing, you know, because a therapy cannot be art. Painting, so art wasn't therapy, but painting was therapy, thus painting cannot be art. Of course, when the teachers were upset about modernism, it was painting they thought about. And there was no doubt that modernist painting was art, but the problem with modernist painting was that it was too much art. And yeah, just one little story more about art school. And that was, oh yeah, the coolest thing you could say in 1993 in my art school was that, like, your main tool in your practice was the telephone. I make phone calls all day. That's what I do. You know, organizing, and you know, get someone to make, you know, to get your artwork made in a factory. You know, that was cool. That was back in 1993. I mean, I know a lot of things have happened since then. Now, of course, performance is very trendy. You know, that's why I'm doing it. But what is even trendier is that you get someone else to do the performance. So that's a sort of the same attitude. You know, you have these performance artists who are not performance artists but conceptual artists who sort of just, you know, use their cell phone now and, you know, call an actor and, you know, please go to San Francisco and do this and this. And of course, you know, I'm not there yet. Maybe next year, as they sing in the song. I just wanted to sort of like as a carte de visite, as a little introduction to myself. I just wanted to show two images of how I tried to handle these postmodern problems. And so I'll show you my first two artworks. And this is the first one, which then I'm trying to sort of get to grips with my confusion of the ready-made. Like everything was new to me, and the ready-made also, it was confusing, and maybe you can like recognize in these two objects that they refer to the morphology and function of two famous ready-mades of Marcel Duchamp. And still, I was in doubts about how this could work, and if it could work for me. But I thought, you know, I'll take the chance, and this was for the first school exhibition. We had an exhibition hall like you have here, and then every time we had a project, we would then exhibit the results. So it was like a hard schooling. You know, we were not allowed to hide in our studios. We didn't have studios, actually. And everything should be displayed and criticized and discussed. So this was my first attempt.
Why there are wheels?
Why are there wheels? The wheels are there to express, because I'm still new to this, and I wasn't sure that I could do this, that I as a young artist could do the recontextualizing operation of transferring an everyday object into an art discourse. And thus I put under the podiums, which is of course has the vital function in this recontextualizing context. Like if I would just have put these things on the floor of the exhibition hall, there would have been doubts about if they had just been forgotten objects. Though, thus the podiums, which I built myself, I must confess, and in high finish, I actually sold them to one of my teachers afterwards, because he thought them like, you know, as podiums, not as art. Still, I wasn't sure. Even those podiums, I think I lacquered them 5 times. And with first a foundation paint and then the lacquer on top of that, and sanding it in between every time. And I put wheels under because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I could allow myself to do this. So when we would have then a critique after all the works were up, we would have a critique, and then I thought, if the teachers will slash me, the janitor could just wheel them out into the storage.
Wheel them out.
And all these guys, they were dressed in black, and when it came to modernist paintings, there was no mercy. There was no mercy. I mean, one of the first conversations with the main teacher, who actually had a beard. I was lying. He didn't use a brown razor. Maybe he sort of trimmed the beard with a brown electrical razor. He had a beard, and during the first session, and we would have these private tuition things, which was a little bit like coming into a KGB question hour, because there were 2 teachers and me alone in an office, and then I would report on the progress of my project and so on and so forth. And for the introductory one, they would then say, the main teacher would say, well, we are, the first project we will be working on will be about iconoclasm, Bildverbot. Okay. What is that about? I didn't know this word. Well, it's about modernism. Okay, I didn't know what modernism was. The purity, the fascism of modernism. Like what? Well, you know, Mondrian. I had to look all these things up, you know. Study to keep up with the, you know, intellectual Stimmungen, notions that were around. And it seemed like when we were discussing modernism and modernist painting in particular, that Mondrian was one of the worst guys. And I wondered, what are these guys so upset about? And of course, now we know that it was a generational process, that it was an Oedipal revolution of these men against the previous generation of art teachers and critics and so on and so forth. And, you know, we should all be allowed to do this. And maybe, you know, we should even be allowed to go through this process in front of our students. Maybe that is okay. But to me, it gave, you know, it gave I got an unforgettable impression by this, so that I'm still, you know, still now here, 19 years later, 19, I'm still talking about it. And I was wondering, why is this Mondrian person so bad? Like, you know, what's so bad about painting, you know, little blue and red and da-da-da-da? So I wanted to save him, and I also wanted to understand what was going on. So for my next project, I did this. I did a computer program that could generate Mondrian pictures. And in 1993, actually, you know, computer art was uber cool. I know that you all hate it today, and I think that you have reasons to do it. But back then, that was really cool in itself. And what I wanted simply, because I now was, of course, and you can notice this because I haven't changed. I'm in my Oedipal process. You know, after 19 years, I still haven't gotten over it. I'm talking about these men in black, you know, who were in their Oedipal process. So we're stuck. But what I wanted to do, of course, I wanted to save Mondrian against these men dressed in black. I wanted to make him popular. And I thought, you know, what do people like? What are they interested in? Well, they're interested in themselves. So I made a computer program that produced personal Mondrian pictures. And not only that, but you would enter your birth date, you would get a personal Mondrian picture, and that picture would tell you what kind of personality type you would be through the Mischung, through the various colors present. So you have here a person with a lot of yellow, which means that it's a choleric personality type, because of course, you know, cholera means in Latin cholemelania, yellow bile, okay. And red is blood, it's the sanguine temperament, and so on and so forth.
So that's great art, isn't it?
We are not here to discuss that. We have to move on. But it was the attempt of a young man to address the postmodern condition. and being in art school with black-clad teachers, men in black.
Did these men react to that work?
Did they react to that work? They loved it. Everyone loved it, and I was the star student. I got to represent the school at the Kunstmesse, at the art fair, and there were all kinds of curators who wanted to put their business cards in my hands and so on and so forth. But I had so many customers, people who wanted to know what kind of persons they were, and I was busy with customers, and I had no idea how the art world worked. So I sort of ignored these curators, and which made them pissed off. Probably this was this was my big chance, and I fucked up. And frankly, I don't think I was ready to be famous, and so on and so forth. And I'm still not famous, and that's okay. Es ist schön so. So how did it end up like this? Now I am asking you to come with me on a trip back in time. In 1725, the Academy in Paris started the Salon. And the Salon always opened the 25th of August every year, the feast day of the Saint Saint-Louis, who had been a French king and a person who went to Israel to kill Jews in the Middle Ages. What do you call it? A person who goes to Israel and kills Jews?
Kreuzritter?
Ja, was heißt es?
Kreuzritter.
Kreuzritter, yes. And from 1748, they started to have this exhibition only biannually, so every second year. And they started having a jury. So it sort of became more important. And suddenly, if you had your art in this exhibition, could you open the window, maybe here? Thank you so much. It would be great if you could open that window as well. Yeah, thank you so much. So that was a big deal, and between 1748 and 1890, so 142 years, this was the biggest and most important art exhibition in the world. It was like, the Venice Biennial. In 1759, I know this is even further back than 1993, but you have to bear with me. In 1759, this man, Denis Diderot, a French Enlightenment philosopher and the editor of the famous Encyclopedia, started to write about the Salon, and thus he became the first modern art critic. In 1765, he wrote extensively about that year's exhibition, and he added an essay on painting. And what he wrote in this essay on painting was that he said he was a little bit tired of art where you would just see how people looked like. And what he was looking for something more. He was looking for sublime gestures. He was looking for a moral content. And today, we would translate that into he was looking for a concept. He was looking for a conceptual edge to contemporary painting. In 1781, David, the painter, made his debut at the Salon with 4 paintings, and it caused a sensation. Diderot wrote them up to the skies, and the enthusiasm was so big that the French king fixed lodgings for David in the Louvre. He got to live in the Louvre because he was such a wonderful young artist. And he was, by this time, in his early 30s. Diderot died in 1784, while at the same time the French king asked this young promising artist to do an artwork, to make a painting on the theme of the oath of the Horatii. Is the Latin plural correct?
That's correct.
Was heißt das?
Der Eid der Horatia?
Yeah.
The oath.
Yeah, the oath of the Horatii. It's this painting who anyone's been to art school knows. And as you have been taught, this is the starting shot, so to say, of modern art. It starts here, 1784, and David said, "To make this painting, I have to go to Rome." So he did. He went to Rome, he painted the painting in 1784, and it was exhibited in 1785. And it arrived late for the Salon. So the people who were involved with the Salon, the Academy, they put the painting like in a really bad, remote place. And if you're an art student or an artist, you know how that feels. But the general public loved this painting so much. There was general protest, and the painting had to be moved into a better position. Here is the answer to Diderot's prayers. There's a sublime gesture. What is going on here is that the Horatii was a Roman family, and at this time Rome was at war with another city. How should we solve this awful solution? Well, the solution was that these 3 Horatii brothers would fight with 3 brothers from another prominent family from that other city. They're standing here with their father, who is holding their swords, which probably are old family treasures. And they're doing the Nazi salute because they promised their father that they're gonna... I take that back, I'm sorry. That was completely inappropriate. They're making a gesture with their right hands to show that they're promising their father that they're going to give everything they've got. They're going to do everything they can to save Rome, even if it means that they will die. Then on the left-hand side, we see 3 women and 2 children who doesn't really show the same kind of enthusiasm. Now, to the king who commissioned this painting, to the king, this would be a painting about loyalty to the state. And thus the king thought loyalty to the king. But we know that only 5 years after this was painted, there was a revolution in France. And to the people who got involved in this revolution, this painting was a sign that there's gonna happen something. There will be change. And this became the most important image for that revolution. Any questions? So, the revolution came, and David was enthusiastic. He got involved with politics. He voted in Parliament, in the National Assembly, that the king should be killed, and the king was killed. And then Marat was killed by a political opponent in his bathtub. And David painted a painting of this scene, making Marat into a hero of the revolution. But history went on, and suddenly there was Napoleon. And David got enthusiastic about Napoleon. And David became the painter of Napoleon. Napoleon, in his study, and if we look at the clock, if I look at the clock, you can't see the clock. There's a clock in the upper right corner, and the clock says 4:13. And it's in the morning, because you can see that the candles have almost burned down. And there's some papers here which show that Napoleon is up during the whole night writing new laws for his people. And Napoleon said to David when he saw the finished painting, it's good that you show me working when my people is sleeping. Napoleon crossing the Alps. This painting is not completely historically accurate, because in reality, Napoleon crossed the Alps on a mule. This painting was originally commissioned by the King of France, who wanted to celebrate the new ties between France, the King of Spain, who wanted to celebrate the new ties between Spain and France. But Napoleon wanted one as well, and all in all, actually, David painted 5 different versions of this painting. So that's why sometimes you see that Napoleon has, like, I don't know if this is like a real big scarf or whatever. Like sometimes the scarf is red and sometimes it's more gold. And if you ever come to Berlin, you know, who knows? At the Schloss Charlottenburg, you will be able to see one of the versions of this painting. And you can't miss it. It's rather big. It's 2.5 times 2.5 meters. And also, David painted the coronation of Napoleon in 1806. And here Napoleon is putting the crown on the head of his girlfriend. And the Pope is there, and this is actually a job for the Pope. But Napoleon says, no, I can do it. And when David painted the painting, he got Napoleon's girlfriend to pose for it. He even got the Pope to pose for it, but not Napoleon, because Napoleon was, of course, busy with politics. And this is like a really, really big painting. It's like 10 meters wide. It's in the Louvre in France. It's 10 meters. But doesn't it look like a little bit kitschy? You know, it doesn't, like, the resolution, the tight form of the oath of the Horatii somehow loosen up here. And like, don't we suspect that David is starting to suffer from, like, a false consciousness here? Was heißt es auf Deutsch? Falsche Bewischung? Was?
Falsches Bewusstsein.
Ja, from Heidegger. Yeah. I mean, Heidegger didn't live at this time, but maybe, you know, maybe you could have it anyways. All in all, things were less complicated at this time. And just to get an idea how big this painting is, this is a photo of the painting in real life in the Louvre. Like, it's big. This is a big one. And just here is a painting of Napoleon looking at the painting. And you can see it's the same scale. Although, you know, this is more of a close-up. You know, Napoleon was a small guy. Then, well, Napoleon was doing all these wars. He was very good at it. But then, in 1812, Napoleon decided to go to Russia. But there was snow in Russia. So Napoleon got out again. And then Napoleon went to Leipzig in 1813. But there were a lot of enemy troops in Leipzig. From Russia and Prussia and England and Spain. And even Sweden and Finland and Portugal. And there was a battle. There was a battle between 19, 18, 17, 16. From October 16 to 19, 1813, there was a battle here in Leipzig. It was the biggest battle in the world. And 90,000 men, 90,000 Männer, Soldaten, died. And here is one of them. And in the middle of the battle, after 2 days, because there were not only these countries, but also one, you know, some of these like small German states with funny flags. They were also in the battle. And one of the small German states, Saxony, who started out on Napoleon's side, after 2 days they thought, oh, it's not going too well for Napoleon. We'll change sides. And I don't think the Saxony changing sides, you know, decided anything, frankly. But Napoleon did lose. He lost the battle. And Napoleon was sent to an island in the Mediterranean. But the king came back. There was a new king, the son of the king that had been killed by David. And the king came back in Paris, but Napoleon, he fled from the island. He fled. But there was sent French troops to get Napoleon. And they found him. But when they found him, Napoleon got off his horse. He walked up to the troops. And when he was within shooting range, because they did have guns back then. When he was within shooting range, he spoke to the troops and he said, "Here I am. Now you can shoot your emperor if you want to." But the troops responded, "Long live their emperor," and they marched to Paris. And Napoleon was back in business, and Napoleon ruled for 100 days. But England and France England and all these other, they were pissed off, and there was another battle in Waterloo, and Napoleon lost that battle. And Napoleon was sent to an island in the Atlantic Ocean, and he couldn't flee from this island in the Atlantic Ocean. So he took up gardening. And this is a lesson to us all, I think. You know, I mean, he was on the very top. He was like, you know, the biggest politician and whatever in the world, and finally, you know, he can't do anything really. So he takes up gardening, which, especially in England, you know, woke a lot of sympathy for him, and you know, a lot of people wrote to the Times and said, you know, we should be nicer to him, and da, da, da. He's gardening, and you know, he's not that bad. I mean, this I wrote a lot. And the king, who was now called Louis XVIII, was ruling France. The royal family was back in Paris, and because of this, David, who had voted to kill the previous king, a family member, he had to flee to Brussels. He had to go to Brussels. But then David was pardoned, and the king said, you can come to Paris, you can come and be my court painter. But David had been in a sword fight in his youth. He had sort of a hefty temper, mercurial temperament, as you say. So he had been slashed on his face, and through this he developed some kind of disease. It might be cancer. So he had this like swollen face. A very interesting, like very realistic rendition of the man with the swollen face, David. And because he had this swollen face, he couldn't pronounce the letter R in French, you know, and the R is very important in French. King, you can't say king if you can't say R in French. You can't even say France if you can't say R in French. So David said, I'm fine in Brussels. I'm staying here. And that is where he then lived until he died.
But you can't say Brussels.
You can't even say Brussels. No.
What did he say in reality?
What he said in Brussels?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm here.
But it's like, you know, I mean, it's anyone here who's been famous, you know, knows how much work it is. That you have to talk to this person, that person, and da da da. And in Paris, he would be that, you know, famous person who would have to talk to people the whole time because he would be the court painter, and he didn't want to do that. You know, he wanted to, you know, take it easy in exile. And he still worked on his painting, and by this time, it was going in a new direction. Because there were new times, and David was getting older and a bit tired of politics. So he was moving into a more romantic direction. And this also seemed to be sort of the sensibility of the times. And of course, as an artist, you know, what can you do but connect to the sensibility of the time? And this is the last painting of David from 1824, which is showing the war god Mars being disarmed by the god of love, Venus and the Graces, 1824. And in 1825, when David left a theater, he was run over by a carriage and died. But what happened to the revolutionary resolution of the oath of the Horatii? Well, it became the worst that can happen to art. It became decorative art. It became a clock. And isn't it a little bit of an irony that you can find versions of this clock in the royal collections of the palaces of Munich, because there used to be a king in Munich, and Stockholm, and at the Buckingham Palace? But art continued to develop. And the start of the process of differentiation between figure and ground, which we can see in the Oath of the Hieratii, reached a new peak in 1863 with Manet's Luncheon in the Grass. And you can see also here how there's also a further development of flatness. Now, what is interesting is that when David did the Oath of the Hieratii, everyone liked it except his jealous painter colleagues. But when this was displayed at the Salon, there was a scandal. People thought it was too modern. But of course, when people thought it was too modern, they didn't think it was too modern. They thought it was bad. But now, when we look back, we can just say, well, it was too modern for them. They didn't, they didn't understand where art was heading. But Manet had a supporter in the greatest art critic of the time, Charles Baudelaire, who supported Manet. And now, of course, Luncheon in the Grass belongs to art history. By this time, Paris was cool. This was where it was happening. Like David thought, I have to go to Rome to do the Oath of the Hieratii. Now, painters who didn't yet live in Paris moved to Paris. And in 1911, a Dutch painter, Mondrian, Piet Mondrian, moved to Paris, slashed one A in his surname, and started to paint in Paris. And there was development. There was development further, there was a further development of the figure-ground relationship. There was development of the flatness, and there was a development of abstraction. Of course, we know that Malevich did the first abstract images, but then he went back to paint figurative again. So maybe that was just a mistake. Mondrian, he stuck to it. He arrived at full abstraction in 1919. This example shows a Mondrian from 1920, and he stuck to it until 1944, when he died in New York in February. And when we're looking at the development of flatness and the relationship between figure and ground, you can't really get further than this. So in a way, this could be the end of painting. If that is the history of painting that we would write. But of course, it wasn't, or maybe it was. But of course, there was painting after that. In 1938, because of the political situation, Mondrian moved from Paris via London to New York. And Mondrian, he was a sort of an idiosyncratic person in many ways, but I'm sure you've heard like a lot of funny stories about Mondrian. My teachers in art school loved to tell funny stories about Mondrian. But he was actually a part of the scene in New York, and he was good friends with one of the biggest supporters of art in New York at that time, Peggy Guggenheim. And it was actually who was like a very influential person in the art world in New York as a collector and as a person with a lot of money and a lot of connections. And it was actually Mondrian who told Peggy Guggenheim to take a look at Jackson Pollock. This ended up in Peggy Guggenheim asking Jackson Pollock, commissioning him to paint a mural, a big mural, in her apartment. This was seen by the most influential art critic of that time, which maybe wasn't the biggest influential art critic of that time at that time, but we know that he became the biggest art critic of that time. It was this man, Clement Greenberg. And he had seen work of Jackson Pollock before he wasn't sure. But when he saw that mural, it clicked. And Clement Greenberg was sure that Jackson Pollock was the biggest painter in America. And Clement Greenberg, who would work for the CIA in not spying, but spreading American culture, he was sure that Jackson Pollock was the biggest American painter. And this was something that then Greenberg would propagate very intensely. And if you've been to art school, which I think you have, you know about that relationship. But what are the consequences of that relationship? Well, first of all, like the reading of Pollock is impossible to imagine without this reading through Greenberg. We can't imagine a Pollock without Greenberg today, like it or not. Secondly, what is the consequence for the importance of Pollock in the history of contemporary art? Well, this is Pollock. And Greenberg was the guy who was speaking about the development of flatness and figure and ground. And if we look at Mondrian, that should be, if we would take the Greenberg theories, that would be Greenberg's favorite painter. But Pollock was Greenberg's favorite painter. But what is happening to figure and ground here? Well, personally, I can just say I'm not sure. I don't know, that's what I can say. Of course, this is something else than Mondrian. Mondrian liked it himself. When Peggy said to Mondrian, "But it's not what you do." "No, I know, but it's interesting." And Pollock thought it was interesting, and of course Pollock thought it was interesting because Greenberg thought it was interesting. Greenberg thought this was interesting. But I'm not sure what to say about this figure and ground thing here. But if we look at the prices of paintings, and if we compare how much a Mondrian costs with a Pollock, and I think Mondrian is great. I have nothing against Pollock, but if you ask me, Mondrian is my favorite, and he did really important work in the development of art, and I think the way the art of Mondrian has been transformed into decorative art. I mean, you can get clothes and cigarette lighters and all kinds of things with this Mondrian pattern, and it's instantly recognizable. I think that's not a bad sign. That is a sign that he has really affected the way we see the world and the way we live in the world. While you can't really get Pollock cigarette lighters. But if you look at the prices, the most expensive Mondrian painting that's ever been sold was for $27 million. And that is nothing compared to a Pollock like this one, which was sold for $148 million. Which is the second most expensive painting sold in the world. Recently, it had the record for a long time until just recently, last year, someone in Qatar, I think it was, bought as a son the card players for $250 million. And now, how can this be? That there's such a big difference between Pollock and Mondrian. And this is, of course, pure speculation, but there was not really like a big critic like Diderot or Charles Baudelaire or Clement Greenberg who backed up Mondrian. So somehow you can see that those things that Greenberg wrote about Pollock, of course it doesn't work always, but in this case it seemed that you can sort of directly translate it into money. I think that is a bit interesting. Any questions so far?
Why don't you talk about Barnett Newman?
Why I'm not talking about Barnett Newman? What?
He didn't give a shit on. He was friends with Pollock, but he didn't give a shit on Mondrian. He was arguing with Mondrian.
Barnett Newman was arguing with Mondrian. Yeah.
Who was afraid of red, yellow, and blue, and he was further ahead, I think.
Yeah, and what is your position on this?
My position is that Mondrian is completely uninteresting in comparison
with Barnett Newman?
But he was also.
You're not serious.
He was pushed by Greenberg as well, but.
Well, I wouldn't say that Newman was pushed by Greenberg. I think, like Newman, he was pretty good at holding his own. Like Newman was a person who was very well formulated. While Mondrian, if you read Mondrian did a lot of writing, but it's rather confused. And of course, Mondrian was, he wasn't that good at English. Newman was like a really, really good writer. But maybe you're one of those, literary people.
I don't think so. Barnett Newman was completely uninterested in Mondrian because he was boring to him. He was talking about harmonies, and that didn't interest Barnett Newman.
Yeah, but you see that, Newman did the mistake that you shouldn't do, and that mistake is that you shouldn't listen to what artists say about their work. That's a big mistake. You should look at the work, because artists are stupid. And they're not stupid, but the way an artist can be intelligent is by making work. If you want to talk, then you should write literature.
Stand in front of Barnett Newman and
I like Newman. I like his paintings. I think his writing is uninteresting but impressive. I love Mondrian. I think his writing is crap. It seems that you don't like Mondrian because Newman doesn't like him.
yes, because
You're with Newman. Yeah. Yeah. Well, then you're a fan. Then you're a fan, and then we could also argue about George Michael, and George Michael likes Elton John. Thus, Elton John is also great. I think Elton John is great. This is how it happens. What do you? I'd like to give you the last word on here. I'm the one with the microphone, but.
Well, it was just a question why you don't talk about Barnett Newman, and why do you like Mondrian? I can't understand really.
Yeah, well, I could talk about Newman, but he came later, much later, and I can't talk about everything, I would like to talk about Helen Frankenthaler, especially Helen Frankenthaler.
But then why you like Mondrian?
That I have tried to explain as well as I could, and that question of yours shows that this whole enterprise has been a big failure, and I'm sorry. Now, what's the time now? Oh my God. Oh my God. I said to the video guy, if it goes on for more... the video guy, Herr Robert, he said, how long will you perform? I said, hopefully 45 minutes. And if it takes 1 hour and 15 minutes or more, stop me. It's 21:11 now. I mean, now we started a little bit late, but still. So I have to wrap this up. And of course, there's a lot of developments from Pollock. This was composition number 5 from 1948, and so on. And the question of the question of the title. Did Pollock sing while dripping? We have to sort of leave hanging in the air. But if we should believe like the theories of Clement Greenberg and medium specificity, there couldn't have been any singing. Pollock can't have been singing while dripping. This would ruin the whole enterprise. But we know that Pollock listened to music while dripping. We know from quotes from his wife, who was also like a prominent painter and hasn't gotten like enough credit, Lee Krasner, that Pollock was like a jazz freak. But he didn't listen to like avant-garde jazz. He listened to the guy, you know, with the guy with the trumpet, with the funny voice. No, Louis Armstrong. Yeah, you know, old guys, Louis Armstrong, Coleman Hawkins, people like that, and actually MoMA, they released a CD called Jackson Pollock Jazz in 1999. In 1999, it was only sold at MoMA, and it has on the picture, it has it's sort of shot from under. And it shows Jackson Pollock dripping on glass, and then the blue sky in the background. Jackson Pollock Jazz, and it contains like music from Jackson Pollock's personal collection of jazz records. It was only sold at MoMA. It's now out of print and is a collector's item, and you have to pay $50 for it on eBay. And you know. So I think he listened to jazz. Like there's a quote from Lee Krasner said that he could like listen to jazz like, you know, in days on end. He was a music freak. So I mean, can't you imagine that there was at least a little bit of humming while dripping? I don't think we can be so sure that there wasn't. Now, to wrap it up, and I wanted really to just to talk about David and all these things as a background for what I really wanted to say. And what I wanted to say is that I'm a little bit worried about like the art situation now. I'm worried about conceptual art, which all art is today. And if you imagine like conceptual art was like invented in the 60s, you know, that we've had like conceptual art for 50 years now, and there doesn't seem to be a change. And quite frankly, you know, I mean, I'm not the person who believes in development. You know, I think that was a part of modernism, that there was development, and I don't believe that there's going to be development now. But still, all this conceptual art is, you know, and the thing is that like. You know, all these guys in art school, you know, who did paintings, and I thought, well, you know, they were pathetic. And sort of, this is some of the only art I can stand now. And I have like a personal feeling that conceptualism is getting watered down a little bit in the same time that like the oath of the Horashai, you know, it got watered down. And this clock, it was made, you know, the dating is a bit different. Like, some people say this was made in 1795, so that would be 11 years after the original painting. Some say it's 1805, so that would be 21 years after the original painting. Some say it's 1815, so that'd be 31 years after the original painting. But still, we've had conceptual art for 50 years, and it's the same buzzwords all over again, all the whole time. And I think this is also a problem, you know, with artists writing or people writing about art, is that back then, Clement Greenberg, he had access to prominent publications who would not publish bullshit. And he was well formulated. I mean, he worked for the CIA, he was a very, very powerful man, blah, blah, blah. You can have like a lot of views on Clement Greenberg, but he was a critic who was passionate about what he was doing, and he was a very good writer. And when I started out preparing for this lecture, performance lecture, you know, my position was like the old position, even like the position of my teachers, that, you know, he was a bad guy and da 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 da. But then I started to read him and da 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 da. You know, I mean, someone has to do the job, and at least he was, you know, passionate about the things he spoke about, and he formulated some views that we now can have views about. And I must say that the later experiences that I had in art school, after, you know, these black men, the men in black, like later on when I moved to Copenhagen to the Royal Academy and studied there for 7 years. I studied in Stockholm for 2 years with the men in black, and then I studied at the Royal Academy in Copenhagen. I'm really trying to wrap this up now. For 7 years. It was only hippies. It was only hippies teaching, and everything was fine. And it was like, you know, like you said earlier, that, you know, we didn't have to conceptualize everything. Everything was fine. And then, you know, so there was no need of any Oedipal processes. So, you know, I'm still doing the Oedipal process, you know, here about those first 2 years. But now, you know, with the internet, you know, you can spread writing, and you can spread writing about art by just pushing a button. And if you pay like around $1,000, you can get eFlux to send your art press release out all over the world. And for some reason, you know, they've sent me these press releases for years, and I've always thought, I can't shut it off. I have to keep up with what is going on. It's like the same words and the same da da da. It's like from all over the world, and it's the same da 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 da. And finally, you know, just a few weeks ago, I scrolled down to the bottom of the page and said, no, thank you. And it was like, it was the best thing that happened that day. And suddenly my inbox, you know, I can see, oh, this is important, da 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 da. And before that, you know, all my emails were in between these eFlux messages. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like eFlux? Yeah. Okay. And one day, one day, you know, I had 12 eFlux messages one day, and they were all the same. It was like the same buzzwords in all of them. And then I had just started to play the ukulele, and I decided to write a song about eFlux. But before that, just one more final thing, as Steve Jobs used to say. You know, Steve Jobs was a Buddhist. And a lot of people think that the worst thing that can happen if you die as a Buddhist is that you're reborn as a worm who's eating meat from dead animals, or maybe even meat from animals that are alive. But actually, Buddhism has a hell. Actually, Buddhism has 16 different hells, 8 hot ones and 8 cold ones. And you only have to stay there for a limited amount of time. The longest time you can spend in a Buddhist hell is 3 quintillion years. that's a 3 and 18 zeros. So that's the worst thing that can happen to Steve Jobs. But of course, we don't know what happens after that. Okay, now there is, when we're talking about art, and we're not longer talking about modern art, we're not even talking about postmodern art, we're talking about contemporary art. And since we're talking about contemporary art, we're safe, because it can always be contemporary. Now the problem is when you're doing that in German, because it's called zeitgenössische Kunst, or zeitgenössisches. I should. Zeit, yeah, with yeah, Zeit, but genössisches. Zeitgenössische Kunst. I find that's hard to say. I think maybe even for a German, it's a little bit hard to say. So I have a suggestion for you, who's working with Zeitgenössische Kunst. And the microphone, this German, very sensitive. Neumann microphone is a little bit sensitive to Zeitgenössische Kunst. Zeitgenössische Kunst. It's difficult, and you know, I mean, Berlin is becoming the capital of Europe. People, you know, artists from all over the world is coming to Berlin to be artists, and some of them actually try to learn German, believe it or not. And I have a suggestion, a concrete suggestion, an invention, a novelty for the German language, and that is that we're making eine Abkürzung. Is this the name?
Abkürzung.
Abkürzung. We simply call it Sitka. Sitka. And I mean, now you know, and I know what you're going to say, and you say, that's taken already. That is taken. Because it means a Zentralkomitee, Central Committee. And especially here in Leipzig, because it used to be, you know, part of the communist part of Germany, we're very well aware of this. But, you know, those days are gone. Communism is gone. You know, Zitka is up for grabs. And wouldn't it be just, you know, more practical? And it could be like the word kitsch. Who was in which, like the word kitsch, this is interesting, like at the exact same time as the luncheon in the grass, 1863, like in the 1860s, the word kitsch was invented in Germany, in Munich. Because there was like a new middle class, you know, wanting some kind of art, but they wasn't, you know, they were not as seriously interested in art as, you know, the upper class was earlier. So they should just have something. So this word for this new thing, this new social phenomenon, was invented in Munich in the 1860s or 70s. So to me, it's interesting to see that there's this concept for, like, you know, bad art, which is coming to the surface at the same time as the luncheon in the grass, where you suddenly got this like division of like people actually not liking it. Like when David did his new stuff, everyone liked it. So here we see, you know, the sort of a development of like an avant-garde and like art for the people, which then Clement Greenberg would write about in his early Trotskyist period in avant-garde and kitsch. It was actually Clement Greenberg who imported this word to the English language. ZK, yeah, Central Committee. So yes, I don't. Why did I talk about the kitsch? Yeah. Anyways, yeah, because I didn't say it earlier, and it was an important point, I thought. So this is my suggestion. ZK. You know, the central committees are gone. The communists are gone. ZK, much easier than Zeitgenössische Kunst. And I think, and oh yes, this was my point, that even like kitsch, this Abkürzung could then also come into English. So we don't even have to say contemporary art, but just, you know, ZK would be in America. ZK.
It's already established.
It is?
Just around the corner is GFZK. It's called Galerie für Zeitgenössische Kunst.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're well on our way. We're well on our way then. Yes. People of the world, ZK, it's the future for contemporary art. And then the song, I must warn you that it's a song. It's a song only like for didactic reasons. It's a song. It's not because I want to show my musicality, because there's none. And after this it's over, and it's a short song. Now, the last time I tried to sing this was completely out of tune. So just bear with me. If I get another art press release containing the word collaboration, I think I'm gonna lose my mind. If I get another contemporary art press release containing the word playful, I think I'm going to lose my mind. If I get another contemporary fine art press release containing the word rethinking, I think I'm gonna lose my mind. Thank you.